السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على حبيبنا ونبينا رسول الله خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين الهاشمي العربي القرشي الأمي صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. اللهم صل وسلم عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين، صلاة تنجينا بها من الأهوال والآفات وترفع بها عنا القربات. اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما. اللهم لا تجعل فينا ولا من بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم كن مع إخواننا المستضعفين في فلسطين. اللهم داوي مرضاهم، اللهم اشف مرضاهم وداوي جرحاهم وتقبل شهداءهم. اللهم عجل النصر يا أرحم الراحمين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a speedy recovery to those who have been hurt, accept their martyrs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal the sick and grant them a victory bi'idhnillah that is near. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow this gathering bi'idhnillah to be a gathering in which we depart and all of our shortcomings are forgiven. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be an embodiment of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Everything that we learn, everything that we take in, to allow this to be a means of us getting nearer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by emulating His beloved seal of all prophets, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're continuing on the series on the Seerah an-Nabawiyya, our prophetic biography. And since the sessions started, we talked about the objectives and the method, the purpose and the benefit of studying the Seerah. Over the last several sessions, we've talked about pre-Islamic society and the conditions that existed before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let alone the prophethood being given to the Prophet ﷺ and the wahi, the divine revelation arriving even before the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. In the previous session, we talked about, we're pretty much at the brink of getting to know the immediate family of the Prophet ﷺ, such as his grandfather, his uncles, and of course his parents, bi'idhnillah, and then getting into the actual birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The previous session, we talked about kind of an introduction to learning about his family, particularly his his grandfather. What was his name? Abdul Muttalib. And we were talking about a couple of the key landmark incidents that occurred very close to the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the thing about this is, it's not important to know just as an issue of history. It's not just a random fact about pre-Islamic history, but it's very important and it's pertinent because as the scholars of Seerah, they point out that these major events were occurring almost as a foretelling of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right prior, before his birth, it was foretelling his birth coming, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's something monumental, right? Something great, something that is about to change the course of humanity and the world as we know it. So something major and drastic is about to happen. Something is about to occur. And so these events were foretelling of the great event that was the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it directly involved the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, again, that's not a coincidence. There is no such thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does something as a coincidence. Everything is divinely decreed and destined, right? And these incidents involved places that were very sacred, even within the Islamic tradition, from the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? So we talked about two major incidents last time, if you guys remember. The first one was what? That kind of really defined the role of Abdul Muttalib. The first incident was rediscovering of Zamzam. That was the majority of what we talked about, the rediscovering of the well of Zamzam. And that well, of course, we talked about its origins and how it became lost and buried after a certain amount of time. And then, of course, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was given the location of the wealth through a dream, and he was able to go and he was able to dig that up. And so he was given the blessing of being the person who uncovered this great blessing that we knew was the well of Zamzam. And we understand very well, with even the Islamic significance of it. I talked about it with some textual, evidence last time, the benefits and things of Zamzam, from the hadith that we have, from the hadith that we have of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and why it's obviously important to us. The second event that we got into, at least, we talked a little bit about it, the beginning of the conversation, was what? Does anybody remember? Abraha, the invasion of the elephants, right? You said Abraha, right? Yeah. The invasion of the elephants. When we talked about, again, beginning that conversation, the year of the elephant, Amul Fil, what we call, and I told you that that year in which the Prophet ﷺ was born is known again as Amul Fil. And that within itself is indicative of how huge this event was, and how it, was understood by the people of that time, that this defined them. This year defined them. This was something that literally defined these people. It was, there's every time there's a major event in a generation of people, they identify with that great event, right? Like everybody knows about that great event. Everybody knows where they were when that happened, what was going on. For our generation, maybe and a little older, 9/11 was like the huge event of our era, you could say. Everybody knows where they were at during 9/11, where were they in school, were they at work? Probably all of us were like little kids, but you perhaps recall, like, that was like such a great not an incident, but a great moment in which you remember everything that was going on, right? Like, you won't forget that, subhanAllah. And people begin to be like, that's known. You know exactly what was going on, during that time. So, again, that was the great event during that era, which was Amul Fil. Everybody associated with that. Everybody knew what was going on during Amul Fil. It became like a monumental mark during history, how we count years, things of that nature. How many years after Amul Fil was it? How many years before Amul Fil was it? Right? It became one of those markers for time. Okay. We talked a little bit about the history of Yemen and exactly who was in power in Yemen at that time and how it came to power. And we talked about a little bit about the history. We got to know it a little bit better, a little bit more. We knew of this infamous individual named Abraha, right? We mentioned him, a name that you heard at weekend school, Arabic school, growing up. Everybody has heard of Abraha and this story. It's nothing new or familiar. And we got to know a little bit about him, what he was motivated by, what inspired him to do what he did, right? What exactly led up to do what he wanted to do, why he was pushed literally to the brink, okay, and was willing to do something so heinous, like this great act of knocking down the Kaaba, right? And we talked about that he built what? What did he build? Yes, a big cathedral, right? And that place, does anybody remember the name? Qullais. Okay, it was called Qullais. He named it, right? And it's still known till today. People can go. It's like a tourist attraction, right? The location of where it was at. People can go and they can, visit there and take selfies with it, if you prefer. Okay. So he builds this sacred space. And I talked about how Abraha, while he was obviously somebody who was religious, okay, he identified with Christianity, he was a Christian, nevertheless, he was a military strategist, okay? He was a military strategist. He was a leader. That was his identity, okay? So he wasn't this priest king, or this priest leader. Okay, he was religious, but he did not identify as that type of individual. He identified it as a military strategist, a general, right? That's who he was. So building a cathedral for him was a strategy move. It was strategic. Okay, it wasn't like a pure religious based type of action that he was doing. Okay, it wasn't like this pure devotion that he had for religion, but nevertheless, it was again a strategic move on his end. How he could bring viability back to this area that had been decimated, okay, that had been ravaged, that had been bleak for so long. There were famines, there were droughts, there were floods, there were natural disasters. After natural disaster that occurred, that let this entire region to be completely depleted. Okay, so he wanted to make his place. He wanted to make his place his homeland. So it was patriotic for him. This was like an event that he really had love for doing. Okay, he wanted to make it viable again. So he builds this cathedral, and he says we'll be able to attract the masses. We'll be able to attract the masses, and we'll bring them back, the people back, just like they go to Mecca to see the Kaaba. We'll bring them to this cathedral here. Okay, so he had his eyes set on the Kaaba. This was like a competition for him. This was a competition for him. It's like, we'll build something that rivals, the Kaaba, and we'll bring people to our place. We'll bring people our way. We'll let our land flourish just as Mecca flourishes. The land of Hijaz flourishes. We'll let our land flourish. Okay? So what ended up happening at that time, he wrote a letter to the Najashi, the king of Abyssinia, and he wrote a letter to him saying that I've built a place that'll make you proud, and I've dedicated, and I've built, for you, in your name, you could say, and I've built so that way we can redirect people from Mecca here, bring people here. And so now this becomes news. People like to talk, people like to gossip. This became public information. Okay. Like Abraha's built his own shop and he's trying to compete, with our store here. He's built his own place and he's competing with us. Almost that type of, mentality. So one of the Arab people of that area, he visits this huge cathedral. He goes in there, he violates it, he vandalizes it, right? And specifically the narration talks about the fact that he literally used the restroom inside of it. He basically did his business in the middle of the cathedral, and not only that, he goes above and beyond. And what does he do? He takes his excrements, akramakumullah, and rubs it all over. You know what I mean? The cathedral, all over. The decorations, the ornate fixtures. He really did like a number on the place, literally number 2. Okay, so you guys see what I did there? So. This guy is just going at it, and he leaves. The next day, Abraha's made aware of this. People discover this, and it's brought to Abraha's attention right away, that his project, literally his baby, right? He's enraged. He's enraged. Nothing makes sense to him anymore. He's got one thing on his mind: I need revenge. That's what's on his mind right now. And on top of that, this Arab guy that did that, he goes and he brags about what he did. And some of them kind of take it as a rallying point. Like he's rallying people up. He's like, yeah, that's what we did. Like, what do you got now? You're gonna try to compete with our Kaaba. This is what we're gonna do. And when this news hits the streets about these people, bragging and whatnot about what they did and taking credit for what they did, he set out on a mission. And he said, I'm going to destroy the Kaaba. He said, I'm going to destroy the Kaaba. They want to defile my cathedral, I'll destroy their Kaaba. And I talked about, how a very subtle, but nevertheless important point that we have to make here, that we learn from this, is within the etiquette of Islam, within our teachings, we have a truth and we speak our truth, all right? But nevertheless, we have an etiquette within Islam that in speaking our truth or delivering our message, we never ever desecrate. We never violate. We never defile. We never degrade, other people's belief systems or what they might engage in, right? We give them the message, we give them the da'wah, but at the end of the day, we leave them be. If you don't want to look at it in terms of, okay, I don't respect what they do and what they worship, that's fine, but we leave them be. We let them do them, right? We don't impose our will onto someone, and definitely we do not mock. We do not mock, we do not defile, we do not desecrate other people's worship, or the worship that they do or how they worship, okay? And this is an established principle. The Quran talks about, do not curse their gods. Why? Because they will retaliate. They will then curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And they'll do it out of animosity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, adawa, like they'll do it out of animosity that they're going to retaliate, okay? When somebody pushes you, your first instinct is to do what? Push back. Somebody pushes you, your first instinct is to push back. Sometimes you don't even think where you're at, right? Or who it is that's pushing you, or what they're doing, or why they're saying what they're saying, or who's around you. That stuff is like, you're oblivious to all of that stuff. You could literally be in the masjid and you are the most respectful person. You're a very calm, peaceful individual. That is just your demeanor. But if somebody walks up and shoves you, and shoves you hard, your first instinct is to shove back. And then after you realize, okay, where I'm at. Okay, and you realize, okay, I made a mistake. Let me admit that I made this mistake. It was just a human reaction, right? So Abraha gathers an army. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentions in his narration, he said he had about 60,000 soldiers. Okay? And I just want you to get an idea of the sheer number of gathered people here, like of that number, 60,000. Again, this is a general. This is a military strategist. This is somebody who led a coup against his own leadership. And so obviously he's got the military resources, and he gathers an army of 60,000 strong, right? And then it said he actually sends for and recruits an individual who's what? Who's an elephant breeder, okay? An elephant herder, whatever you want to call them, And he recruits this elephant breeder, and he tells him, bring your elephants. And he brought about a dozen elephants or so. And he specifically gets them for a couple reasons, okay? Not only because of the sheer power, that an elephant has. It's like literally when you have an elephant, it's like you're rolling in with, a dozen bulldozers. They just stomp over everything. Okay, you don't just you just walk through literally, right? You don't have to fight at that point, right? You walk through and it's done. And remember, we're not talking about modern day structures like the structures that we have. We're talking about clay huts people that used to live in, right? Little homes, little shacks that elephants would just terrorize just walking through, Number two, being a military strategist, he realizes the element of human fear, okay? And something being like alien, okay? He's familiar, but generally, generally speaking, a Arab has never seen an elephant before, okay? It's like seeing an alien, literally. Just the sheer shock, like they're in the middle of the desert. These are people random in the middle, where they don't have elephants there, okay? Like just the random shock, that it would make people literally just be shocked and freeze up and run away, It would confuse people and have them just like fleeing. And that's exactly what happened in many of the cases, right? With the people here when they saw these elephants. And so now he's gone, and he's he's seen these majestic beasts, like these animals, okay, and he's so familiar, but again, he knows what he's doing. He knows that this is a strategy, for these people. They're going to be scared from them, and it's an easy win, pretty much, okay? And that was his strategy, and it worked out, well for him to an extent. So I was talking about how he gathers all these people together, and he heads out on his way. Now, here's the very interesting thing. I told you last time that the Quranic narrative in this incident focuses on the decimation of Abraha, right? And his army, right? Just them getting ruined. Just Allah destroying them. How they were destroyed, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his miraculous army. Alam tara fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. Right? In Surah Al-Fil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send these birds. They have pebbles, and they completely just decimated that army and destroyed, and they were able to defend the Kaaba through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, of course. This is the Quranic narrative. From the seerah perspective, it's almost like the seerah, of course, like we understand, and I talked about, in the initial sessions, this complements the Quran in our understanding of the Quran. It supplements it. So the seerah narrative focuses on the journey, aside from what sparked the journey on the way to, the Kaaba. And then the Quran gives us a very, very accurate description, a very accurate picture of what exactly happened. Okay, but the journey itself is very important. The journey itself highlights a lot of very interesting things. Okay. So Abraha set out on his journey. He starts traveling up north, and of course he's passing by the Arab, and then all these different Arab tribes and the cities and locations and towns, and people hear about Abraha coming in and coming as well. And Abraha gathered, this army, 60,000 people. Okay, especially back in those days, that's a crazy number, right? It's going to be noticed. People are going to see these people. They're going to see them. They're going to hear them stomping, and so these people start to defend them. They start to try to defend themselves. They get ready to defend themselves, rather, right? They want to ward these people off. Like, what's going on? Like, we got to fight him. Why? Because for all the Arab, the Kaaba, and Mecca specifically, it was a very sacred place. Even though maybe, they weren't Muslim at that time, or what we understand Islam to be. These are people who worshipped idols. The Kaaba nonetheless was considered the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They knew Allah azza wa jal, but they associated partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were to ask them who created the heavens and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they said, لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu, they know Allah azza wa jal. They call out to Allah, but they use these idols as a middleman. They use these idols as associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the house itself, the Kaaba, was sacred to them, right? It was a sacred institution for them. So they wanted to defend it and defend their honor as well. And so gathering together, they start to rally each other up to defend the Kaaba and to fight against Abraha. Something very interesting that one thing is mentioned in the narrations is Abraha's traveling, but Abraha was a tyrant. Okay, keep in mind, by all definitions, he was a tyrant. And I talked about even when he was building Qulais, it was this guy was crazy. Somebody was late to work, he would literally cut their hands off. Right? If they came late to the construction site, he would chop their hands off. He was a crazy man. He was a tyrant. But at the same time, he was a military strategist, okay? Very intelligent, very smart. But he wasn't bloodthirsty. Okay, there's a difference. There's a difference. He wasn't just outright like, I just want to kill everybody, I'm bloodthirsty. He wasn't like that, okay? So as he's traveling and he's meeting with these people and talking to these people, he actually would make time to speak to a lot of the leaders, a lot of the people he would come across. And one of the things that he was telling them was that, what exactly happened with Qulais. He was telling people, look, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Your people came and vandalized my cathedral, our house of worship. Okay. So so one of the things, aside from fighting him, they thought, that this was, obviously obligatory to defend the Kaaba and fight him. But some of them kind of even understood why he was there. They understood why he was doing what he was doing. Okay? You know, if somebody's done that, would have done that to the Kaaba, you'd be knocking on their door as well. You know, you're gonna expect, they will tell you, you'll expect us at your door as well if you come and mess with the Kaaba. Okay? But nevertheless, they understood that fighting against him is something that they were obligated to do. You know, it was an obligation to defend the Kaaba, to defend their honor. And they knew that this was a sacred place, and it was their responsibility that they had to do. So now he's traveling, okay? One of the people he comes across is a man, his name was Dhu Nafar, okay? Or that's what they called him at least, Dhu Nafar, okay? And he was a king, like a leader of his people. And these people were located at almost what you could imagine to be the border of Yemen, okay? And there was a tribe that settled there, and the leader of that tribe literally, who they saw to be their king, is this man, Dhu Nafar, okay? And he gathered his people together and rallied everybody up together and, you know, around the tribe, and he gathered together to come and fight Abraha. Okay, Abraha's army literally ran them over. Okay, they were able to defeat them very easily without hesitation. And finally, the leader of the army gathered to fight Abraha himself. And when he was brought to Abraha was about to command, like, okay, let's kill this man. And he's like, wait. He's like, listen. He's like, don't kill me, because leaving me alive, keeping me with you might end up to be working out for you in your better interest, right? I know these people. I know people respect me. People know me. So having me in your possession might actually serve you some good, right? It's of benefit for you. So why don't you think this through? You know, and Abraha, he's an intelligent man. He's like, you know what? That makes sense. He's a strategist, right? So he's like, fine, we won't kill him. Just tie him up, and he's a prisoner of war with us. And they proceed to move forward. They come across another tribe, another group of people that gathered together. And the two tribes here, the names of Shahran and Nahiz, okay, they come across them. And they rallied up together by their leader. He's rallied and gathered, their leader was named Nufail, okay, gathered, and these people of these two tribes are trying to fight against Abraha now. Like, all these tribes are coming together trying to fight one by one Abraha, okay? And of course, Abraha literally walks over their army as well. He destroys them, defeats them, and he takes Nufail as well as his his prisoner of war. He takes him. So now he's got these two leaders, Nufail and who? Dhu Nafar, okay? He's had these two leaders under his possession. These two leaders who had the courage, who had the audacity to actually fight against Abraha, to stand up against him. You know, he takes them as prisoners of war. He proceeds on his way. And now he's gaining some reputation. People are hearing who this man Abraha is, right? You know, it's not just show. He's literally run over several armies now, okay, of tribes. Okay, they're not like little. These people they're not like little speed bumps either, but his army is huge. Okay, 60,000 people. He's going through, tearing people up and apart. So he's developing this reputation. So he starts to come across more and more Arab tribes, more and more of them unwilling to fight him. They're not resisting, they're giving up. They're surrendering to him. You know, and as he arrives, they're letting him walk right through them, you know, go in, you can pass through. We're not going to fight you. So much so that he comes across Ta'if, okay? You know, he comes across, he crosses the tail leader of the tribe in Ta'if. His name was Mas'ud, okay? He comes across, and Mas'ud comes out to meet Abraha, and he says, you know, we're your slaves. We're surrendering to you. We're at your service, okay? He says, not only are we your slaves, but we will obey you. We will listen to you. We are at your service. And by the way, we don't disagree with you at all in what you're doing. We are in complete agreement with you. And just so you know, we have no affiliation with the house that you're going to destroy. We have no affiliation with the Kaaba, right? We have nothing to do with that. we're our own people. We do our own thing here. And he says, and remember, okay, you know, actually, I mentioned a few sessions back talking about the religion of the Arab before Islam, that they were primarily, again, worshipped idols. But then it had kind of escalated. The practice had escalated to the point where they had specific idols. And just like, you know, the Kaaba had Mecca, the Kaaba was in Mecca, these idols had their own houses. They started building, you know, shrines and sanctuaries and just had certain locations for these idols. So Ta'if was one of those locations where their major idol Allat was, okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, Allah talks about the idols in Surah Nuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, and Allat was in Ta'if at that time. That was the location for their idol. And they built literally like a shrine for it, okay? And he said that this is where we worship. We don't worship the Kaaba. We don't have any affiliation. We don't go there. This is where we are. This is where we stay. Okay, we have nothing to do with that. So feel free to do whatever you want to do. He tells him. Not only that, but I'll one up you. He says, I will give you something extra. I will give you literally a human map. This guy, I'm going to give you a guy, he's like a human GPS. Okay, he knows exactly, you know, how to go, how to navigate through, you know, the desert. He knows all the roads, all the routes. He knows, you know, not only that, but he's literally like a scout. And he knows everybody along the way and who lives where. He knows all that stuff. Okay, this guy is your ultimate guide I'm going to give you. So I'm going to send him with you free of charge as a gift, just to let you know that we're on the same side here. That you know, you can go through our town. Don't hurt us. We're cool. Okay? So he gives them this man. They give him this man. His name is Abu Rigal. I know that I'm throwing a lot of names today. I'm going to test you at the end, inshallah. His name was what? Abu Rigal. Okay? And he says, lead them to Mecca. Go to Mecca. So they head up, you know, on their way now. Okay? And you see like two dynamics of people here. You're seeing some tribes that are starting to stand up to Abraha, fighting against him, you know, obliterated literally by their leaders, their kings, their tribes, people taken prisoners of war. Then you find another dynamic where some of the tribes are completely rolling over and letting Abraha pass by. Not only that, but, you know, then you find certain people convincing, you know, the leaders, convincing Abraha, we're going to help you even. We're going to go above and beyond and help you out, right? They're willing to work with him to help him accomplish his goal of destroying the Kaaba, okay? So he's on his way, and now he's got a guide. He has a guide. What was his guide's name? What? Abu Rigal, mashallah. His guide, Abu Rigal, is with him. Okay, they're just chilling now. Okay. So they reach this place outside of Mecca. It's called Al-Mughammas. Okay, or Al-Mughammas. Okay. It's like a little place, a little landmark outside of Mecca, and they reach this place, and the guide Abu Rigal, he ends up dying there. He gets really, really sick, really ill. He catches a fever and he dies. The reason why I mention this is because there's something kind of interesting. He dies at this place and he's buried over there. And obviously later on, much later on, you know, after the story's over, we all know the outcome already. The Quran already tells us, right? They were destroyed. So obviously the Arab, they survive and the Kaaba is okay and everything is all right. But guess what? Once everything is said and done, once everything's over, now you go back and you check, okay, who did what? Who was on whose side? Who was against who? Who was really our friend? Who was really our foe? Right? Our enemy. And you go back and you check, you know, what everybody did during that time. So Abu Rigal, everybody knows. You know, he was one of our people. He's Arab. He's from Ta'if, right? He's an Arab. He did this. He was guiding people here. He was working with them, serving Abraha, serving their king, So they see him as a traitor. He's a traitor. So people know him like this ultimate traitor, okay? And now he's buried, and they go back there, and they find out, he's buried there, he died there. And that becomes a place, like how we go for Hajj and we do Jamarat, we throw stones, symbolically at the shaitan. They go to this place and they literally do Jamarat on his grave. They throw stones on his grave. They spit on his grave. They would dump literally animal intestines on his grave. It was a place where you could go and just defile the place and show your disdain for this traitor, this big traitor, Abu Rigal, right? Somebody who would turn his back on the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I told you, even pre-Islamic Arabia, they still saw the Kaaba as a sacred place, right? And a man who would turn his back on the house of Allah, on the sacred place, he was a traitor. This is not something to be taken lightly, right? And something else interesting that one of the scholars he mentions in certain narrations. In fact, even Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, in his book Al-Bidayah wal-Nihaya, he mentions it when talking about the history of the Arab. The ruins, were still located in the Hijaz, region of which people? Of Thamud. Okay? In the Hijaz region, the people of Thamud, who was the prophet that was sent to Thamud? Salih, alayhi salam. Their remains, their ruins were still located, okay, there. So when the Prophet ﷺ was traveling much later in his life, okay, years later, towards the end of his life, when he was traveling to Tabuk, they passed through the ruins of Thamud. And the Prophet, he covered his face, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he started to make istighfar. And he told the Sahaba to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, make istighfar, and ask Allah for safety, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for security. And, this was happening as they were passing by. So we know, the people of Thamud, they were from the Arab, okay? The Arab knew the history of Thamud, okay, of the people of Thamud. And the interesting thing is that Ibn Kathir mentions that during that time as well, there was a man by the name of Abu Rigal, all right, amongst Thamud as well, completely different man, but his name was Abu Rigal as well, even in Thamud. And this man was a very notorious individual as well. He was somebody who actually used to discourage people from worshiping, from praying. He was one of the leaders who stood up against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even the ancient man Abu Rigal, okay, he was also a very bad person. So Ibn Kathir makes this connection here, okay, and he ended up saying, that what ended up happening to him was that because he was such an enemy and he led the people against Salih and the Prophet and the Messenger, eventually, the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came upon these people. Some of the narrations, they mentioned something to the effect that he wasn't killed. He actually wasn't killed along, with the rest of his people during when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the punishment down to the people of Thamud. He was gone away when the punishment descended, and he was one of the few survivors. And what ended up happening was that people know later on, when people heard this was the man who used to tell his people to not listen to Rasulullah sallam, to look at the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it's not coming, right? People ended up stoning him. They stoned him to death, okay? And not only that, they went to his grave and they would stone his grave too. So there was a connection between this Abu Rigal and that Abu Rigal that Ibn Kathir made, which is interesting, right? So again, he makes that connection, rahimahullah. We know the spiritual significance from the teachings of the prophets. I mentioned this Abu Rigal because the name itself became something frowned upon. Okay, the name itself. And there's a spiritual connection in this. Like when we name our kids, like the sunnah is to name your kids with beautiful names of the Sahaba, perhaps, right? And why is that the trait? Part of giving them a good name is like making dua for your son or your daughter, okay? To bring about the qualities of these beautiful people that you're naming them after within your child, okay? So it's like, it's a technique. It's also a motivator for the child. Imagine you're growing up and your name is, Bakr, right? Or Abu Bakr or Umar. Imagine your name is like something, you have a beautiful companion name, okay? If your name was Abu Rigal, they would stone you, So they're like, give your son or your daughter a beautiful name, because this motivates them, number one, to be better. And it's like making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah allow them to be like this individual. This is the sunnah that we take. So Ibn Kathir mentions these people, that Abu Rigal was frowned upon everywhere. Not just even in this situation with Abraha, but even years later with a man that was named Abu Rigal in the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Moving forward, so now Abraha is in the outskirts of Mecca. That's where we're at, okay? He's in the outskirts of Mecca. He's parked out there with his army of 60,000 people, a dozen elephants or so, and he's just parked outside there. He sends an individual man into Mecca, an African man, a Habashi. He sends him in and he says, go and find out some stuff, see what's going on, what you can find out, what's happening there, the leadership. Let me know who they are, how it's set up. Convey my message to people why I'm here, and come back. So he conveys, this guy he sends out, goes and he sends a very specific message, okay? Abraha wants him to send this specific message. Let them know that I'm not here to kill you, okay? This is Abraha's words. I'm not here to kill you. I have literally no interest in killing anyone. I didn't come here to shed blood. I've come here with a very specific purpose, and that's to destroy the Kaaba. That's it. So if you get out of my way and you don't resist, nobody's gonna get hurt, okay? But if you're in my way, you'll get hurt. I'm going to come inside. I'm going to do what I gotta do, and I'm gonna leave, okay? I came here for a reason, and then once I'm done with that, then I'm leave. Okay, just clear my path. That's my message. He tells his messenger, go and share this message with the people. Let them know why I'm here. And one of the things that ended up happening, as the army of Abraha, was camped out. Okay, there's 60,000 people. It's a huge army. So these people, they're again, most of the time, they don't end up being the best of people, okay? So they start to raid places, they start to look for food, they start to destroy some stuff here and there and gain some stuff and raiding houses and a few towns and villages. They found a bunch of camels grazing, right? Like literally 200 camels grazing, and it had a shepherd. They killed the shepherd and they took the 200 camels and they brought them back to camp, and they're like, we're about to feast, we're about to have a good time. Anybody have camel meat before here? Hashi? Nobody? It's good. At a camel burger. Okay. That's besides the point. So now when this man, Al-Aswad ibn Maqsood, that's his name, the messenger that Abraha sent, when he goes into Mecca, he starts asking around. He's like, I need to talk to your leader. Now we know Mecca, the political system before Islam, they didn't necessarily have an elected leader. They didn't have a king, right? Nothing of that nature. So by the default, the leadership, the go-to guy, where everything ended up eventually, like all the issues and final calls ended up with was who? Was the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu Abdul Muttalib. Okay, so they directed him to Abdul Muttalib. They said, go and talk to him. Okay, if there's anybody to talk to, it's going to be him. So he says, okay. He goes and he talks to him. He's like, our king says, XYZ. He's not here to kill you. He just wants to destroy the Kaaba, right? We have our army, we're waiting outside. So Abdul Muttalib says, I need to talk to your king. I need you to set that up. And he's like, okay, I can try. I can try to set something up. And actually, first the narration talks about Abdul Muttalib. After talking to this messenger, he goes and he gathers all of the leaders of Mecca, all the leaders of Quraysh. And he's like, here's the deal. This is what's going on. They initially, get very excited. They get very riled up. They're like, okay, we're about to go fight him, right? But then they kind of come to their senses and they say, we don't even have the means. We don't have the resources to take Abraha's army on, right? So we don't know what to do. Like, can you go talk to Abdul Muttalib, just reason with him? Or Abdul Muttalib is asking them, can you go and reason with him? And they ask him, and Abdul Muttalib is like, oh, I'll go, right? So he tells, the man, his messenger, he says, let me talk to your king. That's all I need. Give me set up a face-to-face with your king, and we can work things out, right? Let's see where this goes. Okay. What he also does, this man who was the messenger, Al-Aswad bin Maqsood, okay? He's the messenger. What he does is he goes and he talks to the elephant breeder, okay? These elephants, remember in the beginning that Abraha brought them, they come with a breeder, okay? They come with somebody who knows how to work with elephants because these elephants aren't from the area. They come and they travel to Abraha. So this is the breeder. So the messenger goes and talks to the breeder of the elephants here, okay, and he knows that the breeder is very close to the king, right? He has he has an ear with the king. The king listens to him. He's close to him, so he tries to get a connect, and he's like, "Can you set up face to face with your king?" And he's like, I can make it work, right? So he's like, what I can do, I can try to get you into the door, right, to meet with the king. So Abdul Muttalib, he's again working from a different couple angles here. He finally, hears that, okay, the king wants to talk, and Abraha wants to talk, and now, this elephant breeder, his name was Unais, okay? This name, remember, we'll talk about him later. His name was Unais, okay? It comes up later in the story. So he gets some FaceTime with the king, okay? And now this is what I was saying. Abraha, while being the person who he was, however he was somebody who was still willing to talk. He was still willing to dialogue, to have a conversation with somebody. So he agrees to meet. Abraha agrees to meet with Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib walks through the door, and Abraha lays eyes on him. And Abdul Muttalib is a very impressive individual. Okay, he's like in great physical shape. He has a great physical presence. He was tall. He was broad, but at the same time, he had this aura about him. Okay, he was a natural born leader. This is who he was. And obviously, as I mentioned previously, some of the scholars, they identify him as the last Hunafa, the last people who were worshipped, true Christianity. Okay, this is how he was identified. The last person who was worshiping one God. This is who he was. Properly and what was like Orthodox Christianity, you could say. Okay, so there naturally had to be this certain, just dignity about this individual, about being in proper spiritual condition. Just because who he was, what he worshipped, he had a special aura to him, right? A special presence to this man, and so. As soon as he walks in through the door, Abraha sees Abdul Muttalib, and instantly he's affected by seeing this man. He's just filled with awe and respect for Abdul Muttalib. He looks at this respectful, as him as this respectful human being, right? This look, again, this man, he's a leader. He sees Abdul Muttalib. He's confident in Abdul Muttalib. So now Abraha wants to show him a gesture of respect. He doesn't want to come and sit, like sit on his throne and you're over there, on the floor and beneath me. So what does he actually do? He comes and sits down on the ground next to Abdul Muttalib. Okay. And this is huge within itself, for the king to get off his throne and come sit down on the floor with Abdul Muttalib. Okay. And he presented him this hospitality, this respect for Abdul Muttalib. He's like, what can I do for you? He starts to talk. He's like, what can I do for you? He's like, you obviously know why I'm here, and I'm not going back unless I get, what I want. And he's like, you look like, an impressive, reasonable man, an intelligent man. So you want to talk to me about something, it's something important, something serious. Okay. Abdul Muttalib, he tells him, I own 200 camels. And my camels were raided by your people, by your soldiers. And I would really appreciate it if you give me my camels back. Abdul Muttalib tells this to Abraha. So now you can imagine, again, it's an old story, we all know it, but I mean, try to imagine being in that room, being like a fly on the wall, in that room, right? Just imagine the reaction you would have hearing Abdul Muttalib say that, regardless of what side of the issue you're against or with, right? If you're Arab or if you're not Arab, you want to slap Abdul Muttalib at that point, right? You're like, listen, homeboy, your camels can wait. This is like serious now. Like, what are you talking about, your camels, right? We have an entire army, 60,000 people are ready to destroy you guys, and you're talking about your camels here, So now, so Abraha's like seeing this guy's like, is he really intelligent as I perceived him to be? And really he's like, what, I don't really think that we even need to be scared from these people or worry about these people. They don't even get it. They don't get why we're here. And I don't think they understand what we're here to do and what we're capable of doing. They seem pretty oblivious to that. So everything we heard about these people is, they're saying is right. They're just a bunch of nomads roaming the desert, roaming around. That's who they are. Okay. He's here to talk about his camels. This guy's obviously foolish. And so Abraha is exactly the same. Abraha tells him, and he goes, when you walk through the door, I was instantly in awe of you. I was impressed by you. I saw, okay, here's this leader, here's this man. And he said, as soon as I saw you, I was actually shocked and surprised by you. I was, and now when I hear you talk, and you're literally here to talk to me about your 200 camels that you say that we have, and you're not here to talk to me about the sacred house of Allah, the Bayt, right? The house that's literally the center point of your religion, of the religion of your forefathers, why you're here in Mecca, right? Your whole identity is based off of it, and you're here not to talk about that, but you want to talk about your camels. What's wrong with you? And that's when Abdul Muttalib said these very, very infamous or famous words, this famous, beautiful statement. And he said to him, he said, you see, what I want you to understand is I own these camels. Okay? So they are my responsibility. I'm here to defend my responsibility, my property. But what you are not realizing is that the house that you're about to attack also has an owner, also has a master, and he will take care of it. He will defend it. In fact, Abdul Muttalib, even when the messenger first came to him in Mecca, right? This messenger that Abraha sent came to him in Mecca. He said, look, this is the house, this is Allah's house. If Allah wants to defend it, Allah will defend it. If it's his haram, it's his haram, it's his bayt, it's his house. But if Allah wants to leave it be, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to clear a path for Abraha to the bayt of the Kaaba, then we can't defend it. Wallahi, none of us can do anything if that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. He said, I swear to God, none of us are capable of doing anything or even protecting this if this is what is decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's up to Allah to do what He wants to do. And so Abdul Muttalib tells Abraha this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it. And he's like, I'm here not to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my property. So why don't we get on topic again? So he gears it back to the camels, right? I'm here to talk about my property. So Abdul Muttalib, he's intelligent. He's confident, right? And the way that, he speaks, it resonates with people, right? And not just for us Muslims, but anybody who has a shred of spirituality, a statement like that would resonate with them. It's profound. Like, yo, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like we would say, like, that's deep, he knows what he's saying. So you don't want to, he's saying basically, you don't want to go and mess with the Rabb of the Bayt. You don't want to mess with Allah. But he said, if you want to try, be my guest. Nobody's stopping you, right? And it looks like, again, he's telling him just straight up forward. And Abraha's taken back a little bit, He's like, you know what? He's like, nothing can stop me. What do you mean? He's like, what's going to stop me? Do you see my army? Do you see my elephants? Do you see what's going to stop me? He's like, are you kidding me? Abdul Muttalib says, okay, you and Allah, you take it up with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't ask me, right? I'm not going to stop you. It's between you and Allah. It's none of my business. Okay? So he gives actually Abdul Muttalib his camels back, and he said, here, take your camels. Right, this is what you said. We raided you. Take your camels, bring them, give them to him. And Abdul Muttalib heads back to town, and he gets back to Quraysh, and he tells them exactly what happened, and he also lets him know that this man's not going to back down. Right, he tells them Abraha is not backing down. This man's not here to reason. He's not here to talk. He's not backing down. I advise you all to clear out of Mecca and evacuate Mecca. We'll take a break, inshallah, and we'll continue after the rest of the story after, بإذن الله تعالى. طيب, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, الحمد لله, والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So, Abdul Muttalib tells the people of Mecca, evacuate Mecca. They leave Mecca, they head up to the mountains. They camp out in the mountains of Mecca, and they just wait for the storm to blow over. And as they're leaving, Abdul Muttalib goes to the door of the Kaaba. Okay, he goes to the door of the Kaaba. He holds the handle of the Kaaba, of the door, and he says some words. It's almost like a supplication, a dua, but it's beautiful poetry. Okay, and he says, "Oh Allah, stop them, because any man, right, your slave, a human being, if somebody tries to attack his home, his property, he defends it. So Allah, please defend your home." And what's interesting, he calls the haram in this poetry, he calls it hilal, okay? Which is very interesting because the haram is called haram for a reason. Haram means sanctuary, okay? It's something sacred, okay? There's certain things that are not allowed there or allowed to happen there within the haram. It's prohibited. It's haram. Okay, in the sanctuary. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he calls it hilal. Right? It's permissible. Okay, and it's the only one that everything and anything is permissible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that everything and anything is permissible for. So he says, so please defend your place, defend the sacred sanctuary. Oh Allah, do not let the cross dominate here. That they're Christians, they've come here. Don't let the religion overtake the religion that is meant to be here. And then he all of their enemies or their energies are being focused and being directed in animosity against you. They're attacking you, O Allah. They're not just attacking a structure. They're not just attacking four walls. They're attacking you, O Allah, with all their might and all their energy. If you decide that you want to leave them be and you want to leave the Qibla as it is, you want to just not interfere between them and let them have their way with the Kaaba, then, O Allah, you know what's best. We trust you, but I'm here to make an appeal. Please defend it. And this is a script in poetry, very beautiful in Arabic, that he recites, okay, holding the handle of the door of the Kaaba. And they leave the Kaaba, they leave Mecca, they evacuate. Abraha approaches towards Mecca. He's walking into Mecca with his army, and something very interesting happens. One of those leaders, that was taken prisoners of war, right, that he took, who had to originally tried to fight against Abraha. This is where you see the difference between men. The difference between men, right? Some of them, and we have the famous analogy by Ali radiallahu anhu, right? The famous example he said between the white ox and the black ox, and when one of them sells the other one out, then we eventually, when the lion or the tiger comes to eat the other ox, he says that while I was done, right, the day that I gave the other one up to you, when you sell another one of your people out, that's the day that you've died, actually, when you sell somebody out, somebody who is amongst you. He gives this analogy. He said, basically, you sold yourself out, right? You sold yourself out. So those people from Al-Ta'if, they're willing to sell the people of Mecca out, right? They're like, whatever, right? We'll provide you directions, we'll navigate you towards there, help you get there, whatever. But when there were some people who stood up, they were very successful, okay? Or at least it didn't seem like they were successful. Or they weren't very successful. I'm sorry. When they stood up, they got scared and from Abraha and the large numbers, and it didn't seem like they were successful deep down. But they stood up and they stood their ground, and they tried to do what they could. Right? There was some honor there again, some dignity. So one of those people was the man that we said his name was Nufail, one of the leaders, who had gathered an army together and tried to fight against Abraha. He was defeated. Nufail had been hanging around the elephant breeder. Okay, he was close to the elephant breeder. Remember his name? What was his name? Not Uwais, that's Uwais. Unais. Close though. What was that, Hanan? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't say that.
Unais, okay. He was chilling with him for some time, this whole time that he was stuck with him. He's been hanging around with him, listening to him. He picked up how this guy was able to communicate with the elephants, how he was able to get their attention. He's a smart man, right? He's a leader of his people, right? So he was very easily able to pick this up. So the army's about to depart. So Nufail goes on the largest elephant, okay? And it was actually interesting. The elephant in the narration is mentioned. His name was Mahmud. Okay, anybody named Mahmud here? His name was Mahmud. Okay, so Mahmud is the elephant, the largest elephant, the elephant that Abraha rides. Okay, so he was given this name, and this elephant was revered. It was huge, right? Has anybody ever seen an elephant up front? And I'm not talking about like Brookfield Zoo here, like you went to Thailand and saw anybody? Nobody? Okay, inshallah one day. So this was big, okay? So he gets up to this elephant Mahmud, okay? And he gets his attention, and he does something very interesting, and this is where you see divine intervention starting to begin, right? Allah uses us as tools, but it's really the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that takes place here. So in the narration, Nufail lifts the ear of the elephant, and he speaks to the elephant. And he starts talking to this animal, right? And he says, listen, you're about to go and attack the house of Allah. This belongs to the Creator, to my Creator. You're about to go and to your Creator, and you're about to go and attack this place, the land, the house that belongs to our Creator. Understand what's going on here. So sit down, don't move. In Arabic, he says, ubruk, right? Stay, sit down, right? Ubruk comes from the term that was commonly used as, the Arab used to say, buruq al-ibil, right? Referring to a very distinct behavior in regards to camels, because the Arab worked with camels. So what does that mean? Camels are like dogs, okay, in the sense of their loyalty, okay? They're very loyal, they're very compassionate, they're very sentimental, okay? It's just like a dog, right? You know how a dog is close to his master. Camels are like that. When he grows up, when a camel grows up with a child, it'll run around with that child. It'll play with that child. It'll sit next to the child like a dog would sit next to his master. It acts literally like a puppy. And a camel will act that same way, but it's actually very affectionate. That's a better word to use. It's affectionate, okay? But it's kind of different than a dog, in the sense that a camel is very noble and it's very honorable, right? It has honor, like almost like Shaykh way, okay? It has honor. Okay, so if you abuse a dog will get scared and a dog will listen and it will take the abuse. But a camel won't tolerate it. A camel won't take it. A camel, like you mess with it, a camel will just sit down and will refuse to stand up, and you can do whatever you want, refuse to stand up, like kill me, I don't care. Do what you want, I will not get up, right? So this is like the mentality of the camel. Like, I'll ignore you, I don't care, right? It's not going to break. So it's a very distinct behavior. So he tells him, being Arab, he says, "Ubruk, sit down." Qais, if you can turn off the speaker, so I just have enough time, inshallah, before Salah to finish. He tells him he tells the camel to sit down, okay? Or I'm sorry, the elephant to sit down, just like he would tell the camel to sit down. And he says, "Go back to where you came from. Don't come in this land." Okay? And the narration, it says that the elephant Mahmoud sat down and just parks it. And when they were ready to get up and move, they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't leave. The animal was not moving. And he's like, this was something very strange. So Abraha says, go and call your leader. Go and call the breeder here, Unais. Tell him to do something. Get this elephant going. We gotta go. One of the scholars in his books, he mentions that he didn't not only just did he sit down, but he laid down on his side, this elephant. Like, he's like, I'm chilling, mirtah. Okay. This big elephant is like, I'm not going anywhere. Okay. So basically Unais comes and tries to fix what's going on, like see what's wrong with this elephant. Abraha is furious at this moment. He's angry. He's like, I can't leave. He's like, my elephant's not even going anywhere. He's like, so Unais starts doing all the tricks in the book and try to get this elephant to move, and he won't get up. So he finally says, he's like, something spooked this elephant. He's spooked. He's scared, right? So he's like, let's try something different. So right now the elephant is facing towards the Kaaba. He's not walking. So he's like, let's turn him around. So as soon as he turns him around, he stands up and he starts to walk the opposite way of the Kaaba. Then he turns him back towards the Kaaba and he'll sit down. Subhanallah. And then he's like, okay, let's try this again. So he gets him up, points him in the direction away from the Kaaba, opposite of the Kaaba. He stands up and he starts walking. Then he turns him, tries to pull him and tug him, and literally, they start literally throwing hooks in the elephant's belly, torturing this elephant to try to get him to move, injuring the elephant, right? And he would refuse. He would sit down and lay down, and he would not get up. Okay, this is again being stubborn. Where that term comes, buruq al-ibil, being stubborn as a camel. This is where they got it from. And this elephant just became super stubborn. Next time, inshallah, we're going to bring a camel here, inshallah. Noor has some connections, inshallah, in the back. She's going to bring us a camel so you guys can see how stubborn they are. So he's like, didn't you, like seeing this happen is completely bizarre to Abraha, bizarre to Unais, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Al-Fil. And he talks about this, and we know the picture. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this. Do you not see how your Lord, how we managed, how we handled, how we took care of the companions of the elephants? And then tells us exactly what happened, right? So we know that there were very small birds that came, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant that they're equivalent to like what we would call sparrows, okay? a lot of narrations Ibn Kathir mentions, right, about these very exotic birds and these small birds and how they looked and what they were like. And some of the narrations give us an impression that they weren't ordinary birds, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. They were very unique with a specific purpose, and Allahu A'lam, exactly. We have some narrations, some of them are authentic, some not so much, but we do know that the word of the Quran Allah uses ababil, right, to describe these birds. And Ibn Kathir, mentions a lot that, again, they were, there's a lot of very exotic narrations and weak and unreliable narrations, but ababil is the term that was used. And the classical Arab, they use this term for like small birds, okay, that we would consider like similar to sparrows. And they would use it for that type of bird. So they come in the direction, as mentioned, as more authentic generations, that's the narration that's mentioned, is they come from the seaside, closest to, the sea, from there coming to Mecca. And later, after this happened, Quraysh, they went and asked the different tribes, like, did you guys see those birds? Did you guys see those birds? And they went from one tribe to another tribe, all the way literally up into the seaside where the tribes used to be, some of the tribes. And they said, did you guys see birds? And they're like, yes, they came literally from nowhere. They came from the sky. And they filled up the entire sky, right? And they just flew over us. And there was something, subhanAllah, very miraculous just seeing that, right? That these birds come out of the blue, from over the ocean, and they just fly right over into Mecca. And on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that they had stones. And the narration mentioned that they were very, very tiny stones, like pebbles that they were holding, like literally the size of like a chickpea, okay? And it mentions that they were holding 3 stones, one in each of their claw and one in their beak, that they were throwing. And they would come, and over the army of Abraha, Allah sent them and literally decimated, destroyed, obliterated the army of Abraha, right? And what exactly happened though? What happened, right? What is does these 60,000 people are gonna die from like a pebble? We hear stories about that. You ever heard if you drop a penny from the Sears Tower and it falls on somebody, they're gonna die or something like that? Anybody ever hear that? We don't know if it's true. I mean, I don't think we should try it, but you'd have to have like some sort of physicist here or something like that knows what they're talking about. We don't really know, but we know that this was besides from a physics perspective of it being dropped from a very large high and in the velocity and whatnot. This was something divine. Right, that it was mentioned that this was something supernatural. That when these pebbles were dropped, it didn't just hurt people or kill people. It literally it would pierce through people's skin. It would pierce through people's limbs. They would fall off, as it was mentioned in the narration. Right, it wasn't just stones falling from the sky. They were literally like bullets. Right, that were flying fast and flying hard right over them, literally burning through these people. Burning through a herd of elephants, and cutting off literally their limbs, right, on the spot. And so there's actually narration that mentioned that it was completely just decimating, that there was something miraculous happening here. They're dying right in front of us, like crazy death, like something that's like so bizarre. We knew this was from Rabbul Alameen. This was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? These weren't just pebbles that were falling from the sky, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it was something nonetheless divine, okay? So literally their army is falling left and right. And Abraha's army is falling. They start to retreat back. And something very specifically that the narration mentioned is that not everybody was killed, okay? Why? So some people can be left to go back and tell the story, tell people what happened. And this became like a huge legend. Like, how you hear like folk tales and stuff like that and stories and, are they true? This became a huge legend during that time, right? And Allah wanted people to know that the Kaaba is untouchable. You cannot touch the Kaaba. You cannot destroy the Kaaba. This was divine intervention that happened here, that Allah saved the Kaaba, a miraculous event that happened, right? Again, occurring, subhanAllah, this is like the important part, one of the important parts, occurring literally 2 months before the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, before Rasulullah ﷺ was born. And you have all of this respect, all of this aura being restored to Mecca, being restored to the Kaaba, right? 2 months before the birth of Rasulullah ﷺ. This is very strategic timing, right? This is very particular, okay? That this is happening right before the birth of Rasulullah ﷺ, that people are seeing the Kaaba. Like
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
What happened to Abraha? The narration mentioned that
Allahu Akbar,
he was able to retreat back, and eventually it was shown to the people that these stones, when you would get hit by them, it wasn't like
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
So much so that Abraha, by the time he got back home, he was a vegetable.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
So people can witness and attest to this incident, of what happened. His body began to literally
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
People saw that this was Abraha.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
To humiliate him for what he wanted to do. Yeah, so you see
حي على الصلاة.
not by anybody else, by Allah, right?
حي على الصلاة.
This ended up being defining
حي على الفلاح.
Something that defined who they were, defined that generation, defined like, oh, do you remember Am al-Fil? How many
حي
years
على
after Am al-Fil was it? How many years before Am al-Fil was it? This was a defining marker of the time. And strategically, now speaking about the birth of the Prophet, right? It was also strategic, as I mentioned. It restored the aura of respect back for Mecca, back for the Haram, for Mecca at that time. And it was something, beautiful. People's faith was rejuvenated, was revived, right?
لا إله
Very, very strategic by the part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An interesting narration by Aisha, and I'm about to end. Aisha is born like 40 years plus, right after Am al-Fil, after the year of the elephant. So I want you to imagine how much later, again, she's born. And she says not only was the story of the invasion of the army of the elephants famous for how Allah defended the Kaaba, but she said that the man who was the elephant breeder, Unais, him and the other guy, his assistant, he had an assistant that he worked with, the elephant breeder Unais and his assistant, they were still in Mecca 40 years later, and we know people who used to see them, and she said, I seen them with my own eyes, and they had gone blind, and they were literally beggars on the street, like in humiliation for what they did. This is like the effect of that carried alongside them all their lives because of what they did, and it reflected upon who these people were. Right? One narration, again mentions that imagine the scene of all these bodies laid up in Mecca, literally thousands of bodies, elephants, huge elephants, just in the middle of the streets of Mecca, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a flood, a flash flood that removed and cleaned out the entire city of Mecca, and this was ready for the Meccans to come back after their retreat. They came back, and the city was cleaned up after this flood happened, right? And this occurred in the beginning of the year. This occurred in Muharram, which is the first lunar month of the calendar, to state that this is at the beginning of the year. It's like a new year. This is a new month of Muharram, and we know it that depending on the narration, but anywhere between 50 to 60 days after this event happened, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. People were prepared. People had love for the Kaaba again. Their faith was rejuvenated. Their faith was revived. They knew this was a sacred place. And Allah is foretelling us something big is about to happen. Something big is about to happen. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is known. He was born 2 months after what? They don't say after he was born 2 months after any. They say he was born 2 months after Amul Fil, a day that is still known today. Don't ever try to mess with the Kaaba. Don't ever try to mess with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send something great and something big. And Allah is about to do that. And inshallah, next time we speak, we'll begin the conversation of the parents of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to implement what we learn. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to increase us in beneficial knowledge بإذن ta'ala. هذا والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على حبيبنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.